and of course very informative, and above all, starting your day a very informed person on all matters, because we look at sports, we have the press review, we have the newsreel, and so much, the introduction bit of it, as we usher you into the day. So make it a date with us every weekday. Now, within this extension, I usually have a guest with me, and we discuss matters of national concern. This morning, I want to look at issues regarding refugees. Now, we know that Uganda is the top refugee hosting country on the African planet, or continent, on the African continent. And globally, some statistics put us at 3, some at 4. But one thing we do is we have accepted our brothers, our sisters who are running away from various uncertainties, from war, drought. Of course, for Uganda's case, most recently we are having refugees that are running away from various insecurities, our brothers from South Sudan, Congo, and others. But also have 2 types of refugees. We have those in settlements, and we have the urban refugees. So the urban refugees are those that live within our communities, that we see in urban centers. They're not in any settlement, they rent houses like we do, they do some businesses like we do. They're just like us. The only difference is they're not citizens, and they have the refugee status. Now, joining me on set is a person who I believe is well versed when it comes to matters of refugees, and that is Emmanuel Pachoto, who happens to be the program officer, Japanese International Cooperation Agency, known by many as JICA. I'm very sure you have seen vehicles, you've heard about the work that JICA does. Now, he is here, and I'm excited and eager to know more about this. One man once said, you never know when you'll be a refugee. It can happen. You can wake up one day and, for various reasons, you have to flee the country where you are. So why not all of us make a conducive environment for any that should uncertainty of fate take us that way? Well, the ground is very fertile. Welcome to our studios. I'm happy to have you and delighted to hear from you. Good morning.
Thank you, Robert. As Robert mentioned, my name is Emmanuel. I work with the JICA. JICA is Japan International Cooperation Agency, and it is the official development assistance arm of the government of Japan. And we have been active in Uganda for a number of years now in several sectors. Not only refugees, we have infrastructure, we have agriculture, we have basic human needs, we have human development areas, we are also in the Northern Uganda development programs. So we have been very active in Uganda. And if you give me a chance, I will explain to you what exactly we do in some of these areas.
Well, I'm very eager to know, because when you say you've been active, so which areas have you been active?
Thank you. So, for example, in the economic infrastructure sector, we have been very, very active in many of the infrastructure development that you see in Kampala, across the country. Many of you are well versed with the now Kampala flyover project. It's very visible, it's easy to see, it's very appealing, and it is one of those projects that we think will improve a lot in terms of traffic within the Kampala area. And this project is supposed to be one of those flagship projects that we see that will help the government of Uganda a lot. Of course, we have also been, apart from the flyover now, we have been very active in bridge construction. Many of you know the Nile Bridge that is in Jinja, that was also done by official support of the government of Japan. And even after that, we have agriculture support to the government of Uganda. And in agriculture, we have a number of projects that have been being implemented. One of the most famous one is the PRIDE project. PRIDE is a project that helps to improve the capacity of Uganda to grow rice and increase the consumption of rice in the country. So that is a very important project for us. We think it will give a very big impact. If Uganda doesn't import rice, that means we will be able to export more rice and get more foreign income, and that will improve our economy as a country. So we think that is a very important area. In that also we have smaller projects which are helping farmers, especially in northern Uganda, to support them in livelihood improvement. One of the projects that we have is the Northern Uganda Livelihood Improvement Project. It's a very good project, especially coming from the background of war in northern Uganda, where farmers did not have the opportunity to do farming in a meaningful way. So this project helps to support these farmers, not just to grow crops for their own consumption, but also to keep some money to grow that crop for commercial purposes. And this is helping to transform the families in some of these farming areas in northern Uganda.
Now, you've talked about a number of projects, talk about the road construction, that in agriculture, but for today, we want to look at interventions by JICA in Uganda regarding refugees. So let's look at those particular projects that target the refugees in Uganda.
Thank you, Robert. Before I go into the refugee program itself, allow me to just highlight 3 more of the areas, priority areas that JICA is engaged in. And one of those is the basic human needs. That is a very important area because it involves infrastructure in terms of health, education, in terms of capacity building of government officials, Ugandans at large. So we feel this is as well a very important area that JICA is engaged in. In terms of this, you could, if you have been moving around the country, you know that we have regional referral hospitals that have been refurbished by JICA's support. We have a number of persons that have been trained in health service delivery in Uganda. As well, we have in the education sector, you know that the now famous Nakawa Vocational Training. Now it's a college. It used to be a training, a vocational institute. Now it has become a college, courtesy of JICA's support. This is an area that JICA has been working on for a very, very long time. And vocational training is one of those areas that is very rich in terms of growth of the economy. Many people think that formal education is when you go to university and you finish and you go do your master's, but vocational education is one of those areas that has been very much ignored at some point in Uganda by the citizens. Government likes it very much, but the citizens do not have it in their mind that vocational education is important. So we have tried to build that capacity in terms of vocational education, and we have partnered with Nakawa for a very long time in this. The other area is human resource development. As I alluded to earlier, we train a lot of government officials. We train a lot of Ugandans in various fields. Some of the trainings happen in country, some of the trainings happen outside of Uganda, maybe in Japan, where we do a lot of exchange with expertise, different expertise in different fields. And that has been one of those areas that we think will prosper Uganda to the next level. And the final one is Northern Uganda development. This has been an area that we started in 2009 after the cessation of hostilities in Northern Uganda. Robert, you may know that Northern Uganda went through a lot of turmoil in the early years, and a number of issues were on the ground that were inhibiting the development of Northern Uganda. And so JICA went to Northern Uganda and started a number of projects, and in some of the areas were infrastructure projects, others were mainly capacity development of the local governments to be able to deliver services. And in this, we partner with a number of ministries. For example, for the projects that are aiming at development of capacity of local governments, we partner with the Ministry of Local Government as our direct counterpart. Thank you very much.
Now, that said, still takes me back to those that target the refugees, because being the biggest host community or host country in Africa, many times we've had this issue of refugees. We have host communities having their issues. We have the burden of refugees. We may not have yet gotten or sooner to the actual end of refugees yet coming into this country. So what are those interventions that you have as JICA?
Thank you, Robert. As you mentioned, Uganda is one of those countries that hosts so many refugees. And this is because of the conducive atmosphere that our government has created for the refugees in Uganda. We have a very generous refugee policy that openly welcomes refugees into the country. And as you mentioned, we have over 1.5 million refugees in a country with this economy. And most of these refugees are located in either West Nile or Southwest. Of course, we have urban refugees, as you talked about earlier, and these urban refugees are scattered around the urban centers of Uganda, some in Kampala, some in the urban areas of, like, for example, Arua, Mbarara, Hoima, they're all scattered there. And these refugees, because of our generous policy, have the right to move to every corner of the country, wherever they can. They move and they can access all the services that me and you as Ugandans access. And so because of that, it has put some kind of strain on the social services that we have in the country. And JICA's approach in relation to handling this refugee issue is to support the government of Uganda to be able to handle the stress that comes with hosting so many refugees in Uganda.
And so what are those interventions?
Yes, so if I can give you a few of those interventions. JICA's interventions specifically in the refugee area, I would say kicked off around 2017, 2018, when we had the Solidarity Summit in Uganda. I hope you can recall that.
Well, I remember it was a speak resort, Munyonyo.
Exactly.
And there was a very big pledge of money to be given to government. We had the Secretary General of the United Nations.
Yes.
I think by then it was Ban Ki-moon. No, I think it was
Antonio.
Antonio, sorry,
Yes.
pardon me, Antonio
Yes.
Guterres, who arrived, and there was so much commitment.
Yes.
To have basket of money to help around.
Exactly. So as you said, many agencies and organizations and countries actually pledged to support the refugee cause. And one of the areas that JICA did was to support, first of all, in finding out what are those impacts on the infrastructure of the country in regards to the influx of refugees, especially in West Nile sub-region. So we commissioned a study to find out the impact of refugees on the social infrastructure of the West Nile sub-region. And following that, that study, we found out a number of gaps, a number of challenges on the ground that we thought were supposed to be are supposed to be covered by government, by development partners, to be able to make Uganda a comfortable place for refugees to stay in. We identified several projects, and some of those projects JICA will implement, and others have been implemented by the Embassy of Japan. For example, I would give you is that the Embassy of Japan, after this project, picked out one of the projects that was identified in this survey, which was a bridge construction. A bridge construction in the West Nile sub-region in Arua district. The bridge was called Nyara Bridge. And this bridge was supposed to connect refugee community to centers of services where refugees can easily access these areas and get services that they need. That is one. And also following that, survey, we are now in the final stages of commencing a project, a road construction project that will connect Yumbe to one of the refugee areas. We are planning to upgrade that road to tarmac, from Maram to tarmac. It's about 23-kilometer road, and we feel that this road is going to help to send services to the refugees and also improve trade within the areas. If you go to West Nile, some of these roads are really, really, really bad.
Yeah.
And with this project, we feel we can do a lot to improve the conditions of service delivery within the refugee settlements. And following that as well, JICA got a request from the government of Uganda, particularly Office of the Prime Minister, and we we seconded a refugee advisor. And this refugee advisor sits at the Department of Refugees, works with the staff within the Department of Refugees, and part of his work is to technically advise the department, as well to source for funding for the department, and also help in preparing projects for the department. One of the examples of the projects that I would say was very important for the government of Uganda was that in 2021, the government of Uganda approached JICA to revise one of the government of Uganda's very important document in management of refugees. It is called the Settlement Transformation Agenda. This document was a directive from the president himself to make sure that the management of refugee issues in the settlements and those areas that are surrounding the settlements are managed in such a way that development is brought forward in a holistic manner in key areas of government interventions. And so they approached JICA, and JICA supported them to revise that document. And after revising that document, they again approached JICA to support them in developing a new settlement transformation agenda. And this was done through the Refugee Advisors Office, through the funding that comes through the Refugee Advisors Office. And now we have a Settlement Transformation Agenda 2, which is now being used by the government of Uganda to direct the development within the settlements and those areas that are hosting settlements.
Now, that said, earlier I told our viewers that we have two types of refugees in Uganda. We have those in settlement areas. Now, it's easy to plan for them because they live almost in a settlement structure. Some area is gazetted, it's a refugee camp. Now, if you're constructing roads, bridges, schools they're together and it's easy now. But we have a unique type of refugees. And this type, even many Ugandans may not understand them. Remember, someone was telling me, when these people began taking on Kabalagala, rent shot up. You know, this happened, that happened. And to some, it's hard to convince them that these are refugees. Because a good policy, you called it generous policy, that sometimes I envy, but it is what we agreed as a country. Gives them the right to work. They are more or less like Ugandans. The only thing is status. Now, this unique group, does JICA have any interventions, any programs, much as I've talked about the good they have, but they also have challenges. If it's hard for Ugandan to get a job in Uganda, what happens to this refugee? Yet their children go to schools where we take our children. So let's look at that category.
Thank you, Robert. As you mentioned, we have a number of urban refugees in Uganda, and most of them are not as their condition in terms of poverty level is not the same as those in the settlements. And so Uganda, as I said, is very free. You can either stay in the settlement or come to the urban areas, depending on how capable you are in managing your situation outside of the settlement. So the urban refugees, indeed, there are very many, and most of them, some of them have a lot of capacity in terms of business development, in terms of their own individual development. And they are living within the communities with ordinary Ugandans. Now, you may think that does not have much effect on ordinary Ugandans, but if I can give you an example that in a place like Kisenyi, you have so many refugees that live in that area. But those refugees access the same schools that you and I send our children to, the same health facilities that you and I send our children to, and utilize all those services that we enjoy as a country. However, they are not part of the bracket. They have not been part of the bracket of government's plan. Okay? So that means they utilize those services as an extra number on the population. That's why government came up with a plan to include refugees in planning whenever we are conducting our planning. And so in line with that, JICA has a project, particularly in the West Nile sub-region, that looks at refugee hosting areas and refugee affected areas. And it looks at developing the capacity of the local government to plan for not only the population, the host population, the Ugandans, but also to put in mind the impact of the refugees in their areas. So that capacity is now being built slowly through this project, and it's a very interesting project. We call it PROCEED project. It also builds the capacity of the local governments to withstand disasters. Disasters that come naturally, disasters that come as a result of influx of refugees, as you say. And this, we hope that it could cushion the shock of hosting refugees in Uganda. This project is mainly implemented in the West Nile sub-region, in all the districts of the West Nile sub-region, refugee hosting and refugee affected districts of West Nile.
Well, very interesting one. Now, allow me to go for a short break. When I return, I and my guest will be discussing more regarding JICA's interventions in the refugee problem or challenge to Uganda. We return shortly.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala, this is Good Morning Uganda Extra.
Ireland have qualified for the Women's World Cup for the very first time.
It's unbelievable, really is.
What a summer to look forward to.
Big girl energy straight out the gate. When I'm up with my booty, I cannot play. See the sun coming up today. All summer long, gonna kill it. Replay. Sydney or Brooklyn, making waves with my girls down under. Get it out, get your toe in my colors. We gon' be the best in it, I'm certain. Strikes defeat, fast as lightning, sound like thunder. Turn the world round, shut the show down. I was standing, couldn't slow down. Wanna hold on. Turn the world round, shut the show down.
What an amazing effort. Little John!
Turn the world round, shut the
What
show
a
down.
goal! Yes, system from Little John. Ireland on its way on the world stage. What a summer!
Upgrade your lifestyle with the all-new entry-loaded Chillax voice bundles. Now, call all networks in Uganda with Chillax voice bundles. Call all networks, no expiry, no worries. Dial *100 *1 hash and select call all networks. Airtel, a reason to imagine.
Discover Uganda's digital transformation roadmap. The Ministry of ICT and National Guidance and United Nations Development Program (UNDP) will unveil Uganda's first digital transformation roadmap on Thursday, 17th of August 2023 at 8 a.m. The roadmap will be launched by the Vice President of Uganda, Her Excellency Jessica Alupo. The Ministry of ICT and National Guidance developed the Digital Uganda Vision (DUV 2040) to guide the interventions for a digitally enabled society that is consistent with the transformed Ugandan society, from a peasant to a modern and prosperous country within 30 years. The roadmap will present an overarching vision for a well-connected Uganda that delivers on the opportunities, limits the risks, realists speculating how the vision can effectively be achieved.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala, this is Good Morning Uganda Extra.
Welcome back from that short break, and thank you so much for being with us on UBC TV. It is Good Morning Uganda Extra, and we are looking at refugee interventions in Uganda by JICA, where I have a guest in studios, in case you've just joined, and he's been telling us the various interventions that JICA is having for the plight of refugees. Now, away from the issue of urban refugees, now, as you carry out this work, you've talked about Office of the Prime Minister and local governments. Are there other partners that you work with in ensuring that you execute these projects?
Yes, thank you, Robert, once again. In Uganda, of course, JICA being a bilateral agency, our main counterpart is a government institution. We work very closely with the government institutions, as you mentioned. The Office of the Prime Minister, the Ministry of Local Government is a very important ministry for us. We also work with agencies like the National Planning Authority, which supports as well in especially building the capacity of local governments to plan, and as well providing the guidelines for planning. But besides government agencies, we have also been closely working with UN agencies. For example, we have been having several arrangements with United Nations, UNHCR, where we conduct some activities together, especially those activities that we have common understanding and common interests. We have been working very closely with them. We have also been working closely with other partners within the refugee arena. So yes, we have several partners that we work with.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you mention several partners that you work with, one thing that runs to my mind, when I look at the various interventions, they involve both the host communities and the refugee communities. Now, as JICA, what are some of the challenges that have come along in ensuring that you foster your agenda for development for the refugees and also the host communities?
Thank you. The one thing that you must know is that JICA is a development agency. We are not a humanitarian agency. Our work is mainly development oriented. And therefore, some of the challenges that we find, or some of the things that people may call challenges.
Maybe a quick one, for the benefit of my viewer. You've mentioned development and humanitarian.
Yes.
Now, please clarify on the difference between the two for purpose of what we are going to be discussing into that area. Because someone believes that when you're doing work for refugees, definitely it is humanitarian work.
Yes. Yes, that's true. It's humanitarian work, but with a development approach.
Yes.
One of the approaches that I mentioned earlier is that we try to support the government of Uganda to absorb the shock of hosting refugees. And we do it in a more development-oriented manner. For example, the road that I mentioned will be going through refugee hosting areas, that's a development project. But we know that project will have an effect on management of refugees because it will ease, for example, transportation of relief to the refugees. So in other words, it also supports the refugees in the humanitarian way. And also, JICA is one of those agencies that have very particular areas that we work on. As I mentioned earlier, we have those 5 pillars that I talked about, and those 5 pillars are mainly development oriented. With the UN agencies, we also work specifically in the areas that we think could provide the impact on refugees and the host communities. We emphasize host and refugees because we want to create that peaceful coexistence between a refugee and a host community. We do not only go and support refugees alone. We support both of them because we want to create a good atmosphere.
To avoid these conflicts. I remember sometime, I think it was in Changwali, where there was a clash over a water source, where communities felt that, no, you're too much We used to have this and now we're too much. Then also the development, I've seen a number of schools in refugee settlements. Of course, they're not selective, even the local communities there come and partake of these attempted medical facilities as well. And to some, I think it's even a blessing in disguise in one way or the other. Now, the refugee problem in Uganda seems to be increasing. You quoted statistics of about 1.5 million. But today, with the influx, we may even be far beyond the 1.5 million as estimated and noted down in some of the documents available. Now, what more do you think, or is there anything more that you feel government and development partners can do as far as addressing this issue?
Yeah, thank you, Robert. You know, Uganda is located in an area where our neighbors across all the borders have been having conflicts for a number of years now. And these conflicts have been very costly in terms of sending refugees into our country. And one of the areas that probably needs to be tackled is the causes of these conflicts in the countries of origin for the refugees. We feel that area must be addressed. Now, as JICA, we are talking about a nexus which is called Humanitarian Development and Peace Nexus. The peace part of it needs to be clearly addressed so that first to stop the influx of refugees, and then to as well look at the refugees that are within the country to handle their issues in a holistic manner, in such a way that a refugee that comes to Uganda, when he goes back to his country, goes back a better person. A better person with skills, a better person with business opportunity, so that he goes and develops his country and refrains from activities that may cause conflict in his own country. So those are the areas that I feel our government and development partners could focus on, the areas of peace, development, and humanitarian. We call it the humanitarian development peace nexus.
Well, earlier on you talked about the Refugee Solidarity Summit that happened in Uganda and of course brought more to the world what Uganda is going through in terms of hosting refugees. But I'm also reliably informed that in December we shall have the Global Refugee Forum. What is there for Uganda?
Yes,
how best can we take advantage of this?
Yeah, the Global Refugee Forum is a very big gathering. Is the biggest gathering that involves discussion around refugee issues in the world. And this is an ideal forum that we think Uganda as a country can showcase what we are doing in Uganda and how the world can learn from Uganda, but also Uganda can access some of the funding from development agencies or other countries to support its cause in Uganda. So the government of Uganda came up with some thematic areas which we think could be very helpful for the president to go and communicate in Geneva in December. And these thematic areas, JICA picked out 2 of those areas to support the government of Uganda in terms of its roadmap to the Global Refugee Forum. JICA particularly picked out localization agenda, which is very crucial.
What entails in that?
This is an agenda that involves transfer or shifting of powers, decision-making, resources from international agencies to local partners, Ugandan NGOs, local governments within Uganda, to be the ones to take over these challenges of handling these activities of humanitarian nature and development nature. If you may know that when refugees come to Uganda, the first responders are Ugandans. They are not the world vision of this of the world. They are not the international agencies. The Ugandans respond first. So they are the first responders. And they know exactly what what is within their country. So they are best placed to intervene in this area. That's why we are urging the world to look at the localization as part of an intervention that would be very important for Uganda to also improve the capacity of local interveners in Uganda itself. The other one is the transition roundtable, which is meant to transfer facilities that are run by development partners into the hands of the government. For example, in the refugee settlements, there are several schools that have been set up by development partners, NGOs. There are several water facilities that have been set up by the development partners, as well as health facilities. Now, these facilities, in our view, we would like them to be transferred to the government to run them, but not just mere transferring, okay? Transferring, but also with resources that should be able to, for the government to run them, so that it is not left in the hands of development partners alone. Because what happens if UNHCR goes away? What happens if JICA tomorrow leaves? So that we need the government to be equipped to handle these facilities when they are transferred.
Now, that said, let's look at one of the issues where I find Uganda being praised internationally. Yet back home, of course, if someone is being chased by a thug and knocks at your door, it's prudent enough that you let them in and lock. But much as internationally we are praised with our refugee policy, and you've used the term generous refugee policy, I want to get your take on this policy, because one of the things that sometimes comes to our mind is you find refugees as far as Ethiopia, Somalia, crossing a number of borders, coming to Uganda. When you go to Chisenyi, you rightly mentioned, this has an impact on the host communities. I earlier told you, you go to some areas and they will tell you, landlords will tell you, I'd rather give my house to urban refugees. One, they are good at paying, because since they are not nationals, maybe they fear the wrath and what would come with. So they prioritize paying rent. They have other issues as well. So houses may go up. A brief hint on our policy. I just want to get your view on this.
Robert, you know, Uganda is a signatory to many UN charters, and it is very important that we follow those commitments that we have signed. And a refugee is a challenge, but can be an opportunity as well. It is very important to look at them in both ways. Of course, as a challenge, we find our resources stressed. As a country, we are not a first world country. We have our challenges as a country. But as a people, we could find areas where we think we could benefit from the refugees as well, as an opportunity. So yes, of course, our generous refugee policy has opened us up to a number of refugees coming from different areas. And of course, as I said, pose a lot of challenges on our capacity to host these refugees. But also, these refugees come with some opportunities. For example, now Uganda is the center of attention for its generous refugee policies. A number of activities have been done. JICA itself is now supporting in developing some of the roads that we think refugees will use. But these roads are not only used by refugees, they are used as well by Ugandans. So we feel these can also give us an opportunity to develop. Of course, it is important that we clearly address our issues of hosting refugees. It is very, very important.
Well, time seems to be flying. I'll just give you 3 minutes to have your concluding remarks.
Thank you, Robert. I didn't talk about a number of things, but let me just dwell on one of the things that is upcoming. In regards to supporting refugees, we feel peaceful coexistence between the hosts and refugees is very important. is paramount for the refugee to feel comfortable in the country of refuge. And therefore, in that regard, JICA is now organizing what we call a TICAD Cup. TICAD is the Tokyo International Conference on African Development. This happens every 4 years, 3 years, and the last one happened in 2021. The host country was Tunisia, and the next one will happen in Japan. But following that TICAD, we decided to, in order to popularize TICAD, in order to advocate, in order to show the Uganda's refugee hosting model, we came together and decided to start a tournament, a football tournament, targeting refugees and hosts. And these refugees are mainly women. We want to target them. We want to bring them together with the hosts to play and forge a bond together and live peacefully within their community. And this also, we hope, will bring into the light the issues that refugees go through in terms of their welfare, in terms of what they aspire to be. We want them to mix freely with Ugandans and learn their stories. So this year we are having this tournament in Jinja, in Njero, at the FUFA Technical Training Center. Thanks to FUFA that has provided that venue for us to be able to handle this. We are collaborating with a number of partners. Soltilo, Bright Stars, is a football club that you know in Uganda here, is one of the partners that is providing the technical support for this tournament. We are also collaborating with the UNHCR. They're providing a number of support to be able to handle this upcoming tournament. And also, as well, we are working with some IPs, implementing partners of UNHCR, who are helping us to bring these young, promising athletes together to play football for fun in Jinja. So we hope to handle that this end of this month, and UBC, please come and cover that. Show the country what we are doing with the refugees and show them how the refugees can be an opportunity for Ugandans and how Ugandans can interact with refugees and learn the plight of refugees in Uganda.
Well, indeed, coexistence is something that we should promote, and anything aimed at cultivating that is something we should support. I hope I'll be there. I can't miss the fun and, of course, seeing this happen, because, like I said, anyone is a potential refugee. So when you make our world a better place for everyone to live, in case of uncertainty, you've cultivated a fertile ground for you to live comfortably. Well, I want to thank you so much, Emmanuel Pachoto, that is the program's officer, JICA, which is the Japanese International Cooperation Agency, for your time. And thank you so much, our viewers, for being with us from 6:30, those that had started the day with us, and of course those that have come along. For God and my country, have a lovely day. Let's promote peace and unity amongst us. See you tomorrow, God willing. Good morning.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala, this is Good Morning Uganda Extra.
Ireland have qualified for the Women's World Cup for the very first time.
It's unbelievable.
What a summer to look forward to.